Well, good day. It's Dr. Michael Fisher, fearologist, educator, philosopher, designer, curriculist, pedagogue, philosopher of politics, philosopher of the cosmos, of being, of becoming, interested in developmental, evolutionary, ecological, indigenous, matrixial, feminine, feminist. I'm interested in a ton of holistic, integral ideas and connections. And all of that will weave together somehow in this brilliant presentation, which is off the cuff, more or less, with some notes about some things that are really important to me. And one of them will be notions of confusion and doubt. Particularly, I'm preparing right now just a little update for a talk in 6 days to the public here on Nanaimo in the Vancouver Island where I live and play and work, that there's a 4 years ending. I'm giving notice at the daycare that I work at and have for the last 4 years, off and on, and that I've been a consultant there for human development, for coaching, for curricular and creative ideas. I was an artist in residence there for 6 months. This presentation I'm giving on May 22nd will be all about my 4 year journey. And what that's really been forcing me to do is really conclude or to at least coalesce some really fundamental ideas about childhood and mental health. So that's what I'm calling the presentation. That ought to grab some attention and hopefully lots of people come. But whatever the case, I am definitely digging in here in this video a lot deeper than I will in my talk, this public presentation. So let's proceed slowly and interweave why I would be so concerned about confusion and doubt today. And concern not in a negative way, certainly in a both positive and negative way, you could say. An upside and a downside to those notions of being confused and being in doubt. I'm going to argue that being confused comes primarily before the experience of doubt, and that doubt leads to a whole set of other experiences that are really important. So confusion, if it's at the foundational base, as I suggest in my thesis here, confusion will be the new psychology. It is what I would call a new psychology for a post-truth era. Get to that in a moment, but let me spin back to get the weave of my thinking and my experience and where I'm going. Just to let you know, I work with children and I've worked with youth off and on, and certainly at times a lot, but not consistently. I mostly do adult education for sure, and that would be into higher education, which I also now serve in a graduate doctorate program as faculty and mentor. So, why I go back to education is a long journey, but it comes because I have had a really deep empathy, not only for my own childhood, sounds odd, but yes, I really loved my childhood in so many ways, but also I was very aware, it seems, and sort of extraordinarily sensitive, if not somewhat clairvoyant, perhaps, in understanding what I saw in childhood, in my own childhood, and children around me. I seemed to be coalescing all kinds of patterns of what was going on between adults and children, particularly. I wasn't conscious of that in all my years growing up, but now as I reflect back, I realize I was taking in a whole lot about the patterns that connect in how children are socialized and educated in this world, and obviously, Ma included. So I've done a lot of work on myself, my own childhood, psychotherapeutically, educationally, counseling wise, as well as became a counselor, therapist, educator, and have done a lot of work with families, sometimes children, a lot with youth for several years and their families. But mainly my focus has been adults. But that isn't the point. The point is, for this video and the work where I'm proceeding in this new psychology of confusion, is really trying to probe down, really drill down deep into the structures, the functions, the processes of why and how children get confused. And again, not all bad. There's a good side, but I'm going to relate confusion and doubt, what follows, as part of a foundational mental health theorizing as well, right? So it's also about my philosophy of education, raising children, etc. But it's deeply about trying to explore new theories. So bear with me. I am just barely scratching surfaces. I have lots of notes and I've been thinking about this for months, if not years, but really primarily because I want to talk about it now. So let's see where I go. And I'm going to bring in a Hillary Clinton interview just recently, a day or so ago, where she talks about really important notion from Hannah Arendt, the great historian sociologist, who wrote The Banality of Evil and on the history and the structure of totalitarianism. And I think all very appropriate to our times today that we're entering into in this post November 5th, 2024 election in the US, moving into fascist totalitarian type leadership and authoritarianism, populism, and all the impacts it's going to have on education, mental health, as we are already seeing. So let's get away from some of that politics and those larger contexts now to move into where I want to start with maybe why this is so important. Why? But why, says the children. So working with 3 and 5-year-olds, as I have 4 years now, one of the things that you'll hear sometimes is you'll say something as an adult and they'll go, why? But why? But why? My own 2 children who are now in their 40s. But why? But why, Dad? But why, Mom? But why? They used to also say, what? What's that? What's that? But the why question really digs in. So let me start with a research experiment that has been done in cognitive intelligent development testing of chimpanzees. So these are our, hypothetically and perhaps quite really, our ancestors, ancient ancestors as humans, the humanoid species. That chimpanzees, you can have them in a lab, for example, and they will come in and they will learn a task and get rewarded for learning that task. And the one I'm referring to is a very interesting one, and I'll compare it to how a human learns the same task, but with a difference. So let's start with the chimpanzee. Obviously, been in labs. I don't know if the chimpanzee, in this case, as I watched the video of the experiment, where their background is. So that I cannot tell. The chimp, anyways, comes in and begins to be bored in this particular small room. Notice there's some openings in glass, and behind that are some human beings, and those human beings have bananas. At the moment, the chimpanzee realizes there's no access to these humans. They're not paying attention to the chimpanzee at all. So the chimpanzee gets a little bored, walks around the room, looks for something interesting to do. That's important. Curiosity. I want to make this more interesting environment. That's part of adaptation. It's very powerful in evolution. And I'm working on a philosophy of adaptation as core to understanding learning, unlearning, and what education is, socialization, what mental health is. It's ultimately adaptability is for mental health and wellness. So to watch in the chimpanzee within minutes start to play with these 2 yellow blocks, and they happen to be in the shape of an L, and they're quite thick. And there's a table that's got 2 circles on it. And eventually the chimpanzee learns to set the 2 blocks and stand them on their ends, which takes a little skill, but it's not that hard. And then when they stand them on the ends in the circles, they get the biggest reward. And so the reward is delivered. Chimpanzee likes this, very quickly learns that it's important when you come in the room next day, you're looking for bananas. And so what do I have to do to get the bananas is I have to do a few things. So they align the blocks and quickly learn that once you get them centered in the two circles, the two blocks, you get the best reward, the quickest, fastest, and the yummiest reward. Okay, so once that behavior has been learned, the scientists then just shaved one of the blocks, looks identical as all the others that the two others that the chimp has been learning on, but one of the blocks gets shaved on the bottom, so the slope is on such an angle, and it's not obvious, but it's enough of an angle that every time the chimp tries to put that particular block on its balancing position, it won't balance, falls over. So chimp comes in, tries this trick. It's expecting to balance the two blocks, get its reward, and all of a sudden, the one block set up, really nice. It's pretty getting excited. Get the other block out, and I'm heading over to the food, right? So you can just see this motivation that is built in to get the task done, get it right. And if you get it wrong, you don't get the reward. A lot of trials and errors, and that's what the chimpanzee learned. So they've got the pattern down, right? They've learned the pattern. They've spent all this time learning the pattern. And but that second block now looking the same, everything looks the same, and it doesn't stand. It falls. And they realize they're not going to get a reward, and they don't. Keeps falling. Chimp's really struggling with trying to get it to balance, just keeps trying. It's just using all its fine motor skills to get it just right so it'll balance. It's amazing to watch that experiment on film up close at the precision of which they will attempt and repeatedly attempt, but are unsuccessful over and over again. Cannot understand why unsuccessful now compared to all the trials of success. They are confused. And I'm going to guess the chimpanzee is also in doubt now. It's now becoming in doubt at some level of the reality that it had learned to trust, and got a reward for learning that reality and learning the trust and the commitment of the researchers that would provide the goods, right? The positive reward. That was an environment of trust building. And that is foundational to every creature at some level, not necessarily a human level of understanding what trust means and how we make meaning of it. But still, an organism has to trust reality. It has to trust its ability, its capability, its capacitance for embracing and sensing and synthesizing and concluding a set of actions from a set of sensory inputs and memory, learned memory. Very complex system going on there. You can just feel it. It's incredibly important and incredibly complex so that you know this animal, creature, knows the truth, knows what's real. Well, what's happening now is with this one yellow block not standing when all circumstances look like it ought to, it goes into a confusion. And the researchers can show that anxiety increases when that chimpanzee, and they will even sometimes get frustrated, if not throw the blocks, knock them down. This would be like a child raging when they can't get something the way they want it, in the first few trials. It's a hard task to learn, for example. Some children have a lot of patience, some have very little, and some are just outraged when they can't get it and get their reward. And that can be an interior psychic reward of pleasure of, oh, I accomplished the task. Or it's an external reward. So what was setting into the chimpanzee was doubt. And with doubt setting in, the chimpanzee not being able to solve this task basically was less and less interested in coming to the lab door and asking to go in and do the trials. It decided to just go and play and do other things. even though it was missing its reward. It was just too frustrating. And it created this, what I'd call this ontological, which is your reality based referencing for truth and reality. And that is psychically the most, that I know of, the most undermining, fear beginning, initiating, threat initiating, anxiety creating place that a psyche can go into, and even a simple organism can get into confusion and doubt. And depends how far down you want to go the evolutionary chain, that we would call it confusion and doubt. But regardless at the point, certainly at apes, into humans, we'll call it confusion and doubt. And I think that's pretty reasonable set of circumstances. So we now have a psychology of confusion and doubt that I've just been starting to spin, right? And I'm going to suggest this needs to be extended and really looked at in our contemporary world. So that's where I'm going. So the researcher then points out in this experimental video, which is a really important next step in understanding where I'm going with the problem of why. So what the researcher says is that one of the things they did with children doing the same thing. So they took 7, 8-year-old, 10-year-olds, and they had them do the same basic trials, got a reward. The children learned the task. Next day comes in, the child's going to try to do the task again, get the reward. But lo and behold, the yellow block doesn't work, right? Because they've now substituted this unlevel block that has been manipulated by the researchers, unknowing to the child, and the block won't stand, no matter what. And the child gets into confusion now. But the child doesn't slip into the doubt right away. They're starting to slip into doubting what's going on. But what the researchers noticed compared to the chimpanzees, the humans almost immediately, as children, began to check out and feel underneath and look at the surfaces below. They examined the block, not just trying to stick the block 25 different times and not working. The child, after a few trials and it not working, lifts it up and starts to look at it and turn it, even grabbing the other block and comparing blocks, putting them together. Why does one level and then they see one is not level? And thus, the scientists doing this experiment suggest in many, many trials, this is exactly what distinguishes the human being's brain and nervous system, its intelligence system, as having this reflective ability to ask the question, why isn't it working? Not just, oh, it isn't working. Come back, well, I'll try it again, still isn't working. Come back again, and then eventually you leave the task because it's too frustrating, not producing the reward. The human has the ability to really ask why and try to solve the problem of why it's not standing. So that's why is so important, and that's why I would argue that children ask the question why, and they either do it verbally, but often even non-verbally. Everything virtually that's coming at them in their world, mostly, mostly, more or less, especially when the adults are trying to control a certain direction of the reality or truth going on in the environment of the child, or even on the interior of the child, or the interior of the adult, trying to explain to the child what's going on in a particular situation. The child is trying to read situations. That's what the organism does. This is this new psychology of learning for what's confusing, what isn't confusing. Why? Because I want to build a stable reality. And any confusion will begin the process of this doubt into anxiety, into fear, if not terror. And this all leads to various other reactions like fight, flight, reactions, once the fear and anxiety start pouring in, those are two of the very quick responses. There's other ones we could go into, but I won't do that in this video. So they're all responses to the importance of the organism solving confusion, and that's natural to be confused. The nervous system has to learn. The very definition of learning is to walk through confusion and see if you can learn something. I mean, if there's no confusion, you won't be learning anything. What you'll be doing is just operating from habit. So there we go. We have a psychology of learning. We have a psychology of emotional state and sense of development that can happen when someone learns to really be with confusion in a good way. And that means a healthy way. That means an adaptive way to improve their intelligence through going through confusion. So what I've learned in the daycare systems, where I've had the privilege to do these 4 years of observation and participation in various ways, not intensively, but significantly, in enough many hours, looking, observing, watching from various angles and perspectives, as well as working with the kids, doing creative and arts activities, etc., and going on walks. I have learned that they are in many cases, surprising to me, quite confusion intolerant. And I also find that is breeded, if not mirrored, right, and reflected back from the caregivers, the teachers, the faculty that are with them, caregivers. That they too, the caregivers, are operating on almost this constant elimination of confusion slash doubt slash anxiety slash fear. They are completely undermining the necessity for a confusion cycle to go into a problem solving cycle for the most part, not totally. They can often help children negotiate how to solve a problem when the child's having a problem. But what I've seen over and over and over again is that there isn't a language learned. It's not anybody's fault. It's just I don't see the psychology or the language, the vocabulary there to help understand that when a child is moving into any kind of frustrations, distress, again, for the most part, theoretically, this could apply to all behaviors, but I'm not going to push that today. But the majority of the frustrations, the distresses, is children are asking, why is this not working? Or why is so and so doing this to me and it hurts me or upsets me, etc. They can't get the why answered, and they can't get enough time to sit in the confusion of not knowing the answer. Because so much of the management of children, and this is really the management of childhood, especially in an industrial era, that would be a longer conversation. Why have we moved into this management of children rather than the living cultural systems and spiritual systems and natural systems of children being in groups? We have now moved into an industrial management system, and we funnel kids through these programs and structures and institutions, and many of them for-profit institutions based on efficiency, follow the rules, follow the state regulations, and that's good childcare. You can see where I'm going. All those systems are bent on no confusion. Don't mix things up. Don't get it messy. Don't get confused. You should know what you're doing all the time. We've got rules and regulations and manuals and staff trainings for everything. And when I came into the organization I worked with, that was one of the first things I tried to do. And I won't go into that. That will be in my May 22nd talk, which I'll eventually post up here, by the way, on the YouTube, so you can get a chance to listen to that talk, that live talk. There's just this problem of constant closure, premature closure of negotiating and allowing for confusion to even doubt. And as I say, I'm moving into existential doubt for a child, ontological disruption, eruption. where we don't even understand what's going on anymore and why isn't that working? And one day it worked, and one day the teacher said that was the way it was, and now they're saying this, or my parents did that, and they say they love me, but it feels like they don't because they're dropping me off every day and rushing off to work. They don't have any time, space for really communicating and checking in where I can feel ontologically like I know what truth and reality is. And let me end the talk now. My movement when I went into education, this is after several other careers, and I went in is I was studying education and fearism. That was what I concluded was the most important thing to study for the next 4 years of my dissertation, roughly, and that I would show what's happening in education on all aspects of what we call education. And it's our socialization as well, was being infected and disabled by fearism. It was also being motivated by fearism. I could have used terrorism, but fearism is the soft underbelly side of terrorism, and terrorism getting more and more subtle, and particularly what's going on in the world with terrorism and its more subtlety, right down into now fascist authoritarian governments in their production of fearism. And I was saying education systems are just basically not able to contradict this. They're not able to fully understand and philosophize, theorize, and bring interventions into what I'd call a fearlessness intervention. So all of that is leading to more consciously and unconsciously, children, youth becoming more and more suffering with mental health disorders. And those are ones that are diagnosed, but the mental health problems are all over the place, as far as I can see, in children, youth, family systems that are undiagnosed and they are looking absolutely normal. I've had two generations before my own children were born. I've had, generations um, since to watch and observe. So now over a set of 4 or 5 generations, I can start to look at what's happening to young people and youth and children in this new digital world, what's now called a post-truth world. And educators are way behind. We don't know. I'm an educator. I have a PhD in education. We're way behind, even beginning to conceive of the impacts of a post-truth world, an AI world, and the impact it's having on the mental health of children. So that's where I'm going in my theorizing and thinking. Fundamentally, I think we could do great service to children and development and evolution of humanity and consciousness by understanding this confusion matrix and the importance of it and how to actually be with it in assisting children. And we could get into really concrete examples. If you ask me, more, how would I apply that in this situation or this situation? But I think fundamentally, as I repeat at the end here, is it's not so much about solving problems or helping children solve problems or even being creative. Those could be useful. But it's like what we really have to help children is they are growing up, being born in a post-truth era. That is where, and now I'll get to the quote of Clinton as she's talking about the Trump victory in the new administration in the United States. And let me just read this. Hillary Clinton, in this interview with Margaret Hoover, says Hannah Arendt said that the big lie was not always to convince you to believe that lie. It was to throw up so much confusion you no longer believed anything. End of quote. And that is Hannah Arendt's argument of why that would lead to a state of Germany at the time that would allow, in the 30s and 40s, 20s, would allow Nazism to grow to the fervent and horrid degree that it did without being able to be undermined because so many people were in commission with what she called the banality of evil. And this is, again, not the overt evil of the big lie, but it's because of the efficiency of the lie over and over again being brought to through the culture, through the Nazi entrainments and propaganda. And we have that now all over our world, internet, etc. That the real lie problem is really how I'm seeing this, reading this, is it was to throw up so much confusion. And if you throw up enough and the human population has not got a really good intelligence and capability to handle confusion, as I've said and argued today, we're losing people who have a lot of capacity to stay in confusion and therefore to stay in helping children develop capacity and flexibility and creativity within confusion. We're trying to erase it. We're trying to take away confusion, trying to take away anxiety all the time. We're trying to comfort. We're trying to stop it. We're trying to get a solution. But the children themselves are actually being disempowered, is the argument, in that taking away too early, prematurely, not letting them sit in the anxiety, the fear that goes with the confusion and doubt. So this is what she says, and I totally agree, Hannah Arendt, on this point. Um, you no longer believe anything. See, that's the movement into a post-truth world. There's so much confusion in who's telling the truth. Everything's a relative truth here and there and here and there. And this is why there's such a backlog. There's such a backfighting now, a turn back to people trying to get to absolute truths or what's called conservatism, traditional value systems of truth and reality. And if it's in the Bible or if it's in another book or if it's in Trump said it, so therefore it's true and real, whatever the case, this move to a conservatism is what is we're in now. And I don't know if that we can stop that movement. What I do know is we can intervene with children and youth in family systems, teachers on the schoolyard, in the daycares, to work toward, yes, there is something to believe in. And fundamentally, it's going to come down to you can believe in yourself, that it's okay for yourself to go through confusion and doubt and trust. See, radically trust that confusion and doubt is part of learning. It's in every creature, more or less, arguably. So we don't have a theory. We don't have a good theory for confusion and doubt. Today, I hope some of what I've shared will stimulate you to think about these things deeper and communicate with me and, you know, put comments below. I'll definitely try to address them. Okay, have a good day.